Okay, so open up your ACP template. Okay, so this is Flash 4, Timing and Camera. In today's session we're going to cover some more animation timing and we're going to animate a camera. We're also going to go over path of action. The assignment for this class is just to have the ball bouncing across the stage, and then we're going to simulate a camera panning with the ball and then zooming into the ball after the ball settles at the end. So shoot for something like this. Once you open up the template, you'll see this field guide in the middle of your stage. This is simply placed over top of the stage, and this whole situation here in Flash, the way it's set up, and you'll see a shot comp layer and a camera view layer. It's a good example of how a Flash production will be set up. Of course, you know, if you're working in the industry, you'll have characters, props, and backgrounds, everything on your stage. But this is basically a scene file with nothing in it. So let's go over what this stuff is. The camera view, this is a folder, and if you hit the little arrow beside the folder, it'll expand and show you everything inside that folder. We have a field guide. I'll just shut the visibility off and on so you can see what it is. We have a field guide here, which is basically gives you, we'll just go over the 4:3 resolution and 6:9 resolution. 4:3 resolutions are up in the corner. Title safe is basically where you want to have any kind of text titles within this red square. 4:3 action safe is you want to have any action going on inside this square, and the 4:3 full frame is what's basically going to be displayed on a 4:3 resolution screen. Now most TVs now, pretty much all TVs now are not 4:3 resolution, they're 6:9 HD, so we're really going to pay more attention to these. 6:9 title safe, 6:9 action safe, and 6:9 full frame. Really, when I'm animating, I really pay attention to basically the 6:9 full frame, and that's basically the entire white area here, the whole square area. So that's our field guide. Frame counter, that's this little thing in the corner. If you want to render out a movie, a video file from Flash, it'll show you the frames, but we don't really need to worry about that here because you guys will just be submitting the Flash file itself. The mask is just this black area around the stage. If I zoom out, you'll see what it is. It's just a black painted area to block out the area around the stage so we can just focus on the stage. So basically this entire camera view is just laid over top of our stage. So if we shut visibility off on it, on all of this stuff, you'll see we just have a stage. And the resolution for the stage is up in the properties corner. We have it at 1280 by 720, which is HD. It's one resolution for HD. So we'll just show all this and keep it all locked. Make sure you don't unlock any of this because we don't want to select any of this stuff. So this whole camera view is just placed over top of our stage, and we're never going to touch it and keep it locked. It's just there for our reference. Now inside the shot comp is where we're going to have all of our backgrounds, characters, props, basically everything in our scene. To start working in the shot comp, we have to go inside of it. Now the shot comp is actually a symbol, but there's nothing in the symbol. It's a completely empty symbol. You'll see in the center of your stage this little dot here. That's the pivot point for the shot comp. We can click on it, double click on it to go inside, and you'll see that our scene bar here is changed from scene 1, and then it has shot comp now. That means we're inside the shot comp. So now that we're inside the shot comp, you'll see that the field guide is grayed out. Now once we're in here, we can start creating different elements for our scene. While we're in this shot comp, we're going to create a very simple background. So I'm just pressing Z on my keyboard to activate the magnifying glass tool. I'm just going to select a region wider than the stage. I'm just going to go, if you have a tablet, you can use your pen. If you don't, you can just use the mouse, that's fine. So I'm going to go to my background layer and just draw a really quick background. Go to my paintbrush, and let's select, sorry, I had it on alpha there. Okay, so let's select a dark green. I'm just going to do a grassy horizon, and then we'll just draw some trees. Now let's make it much wider than the actual stage. So I'm going to start over here. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight because this is just going to be like a ground. And I'm just going to scribble in some, or I'll go to a lighter green, lighter shaded green. I'm just going to scribble out some quick just bushes. Once we have that done, select all of it. You can do that quickly by selecting the key that we've drew it on. So of course, as we went over in the last sessions too, once we draw something on a frame, it automatically sets a key. We can select all of it by selecting this keyframe. So select that. You'll see that it's all selected. Press F8 on your keyboard. Let's make a symbol and call it background. I'm just going to name it BG. Keep it on graphic and press OK. And as soon as we do that, right away it goes into our library. So we see here BG, and it shows a picture of it. And you'll see this blue box encompassing all of it, and that now we have our background is now inside a symbol. Okay, so let's go to our character layer. Make sure you have the character layer selected, and we're going to draw our ball. Obviously there's no character in this lesson, so it's just going to be a ball on this layer. So let's change the colors. I'm going to select the oval tool in the toolbar, or press O. We can do it here, or we can do it in the properties area. I'll just do it here for now. We're going to make it blue, so I'll select a dark blue for the line, the outline, and a lighter blue for the inside of the ball. So as we went over before, hold shift down to constrain your X and Y dimensions and just draw a ball. Actually, I'm going to delete that. Let's go to our properties and make the line, the stroke thickness 3, so it's a little bit thicker. I'll zoom in a bit. Let's do it again. Press O on your keyboard or select the oval tool from here, and let's just hold shift down and draw the ball. So once we have that done, again we can select it. One click selects the fill inside, 2 clicks selects everything. So double click on that, select it all, or you can just press the keyframe up in the character layer. And once we have it selected, press F8 to create a symbol, and we'll call that ball. Make sure it's on graphic, press OK. And again, that goes right into our library. And you can see that now it's inside a symbol. Okay, so we want to animate this ball. We're going to animate it bouncing across the landscape here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, make a new layer by clicking this little icon here, new layer. You see it says layer 2, and let's call it path of action. Okay, so before we even start doing anything here, let's increase our timeline to let's say 120. So for all these layers, path of action, character, and background, we're going to do for all of them. We're going to increase the timeline for all of them and actually insert some frames. Let's go to 120 and just select all 3 frames here. Right click and let's go insert frames. And now we can scrub up to 120. Okay, so go back to your path of action layer, just select the first key. And let's go to our brush tool. So you can select brush here or press B on your keyboard. And let's change the color to red. Change the color to red, let's click it again. And let's change the alpha. Click on the number here, it's always at 100, but you can click on it and change it, or you can just hover over and drag to the right or to the left. Let's bring it down to 50. And then I'm going to draw out my path of action. And the path of action is basically the path that the ball is going to follow as it bounces across the landscape here. So we're going to start at the top of the bounce, and I'm just going to draw my path. It's going to bounce here first, and then as it bounces, it's going to each bounce is going to get smaller as we go. So I'll have it bounce 1, 2, 3, and then we'll give it a 4th small bounce, basically cutting these bounce heights in half as I go. After the 4th bounce, it's just going to roll along, so we'll just draw a line there. Actually, we'll have it stop right in this little crook here. Alright, make an X, that's where it stops. Let's move the pivot point to the bottom. So when it hits the bottom, so when we squash it for the impact pose, it will squash properly. So select Q on your keyboard, or you can hit the free transform tool in the toolbar. And we're going to move, let's turn our snap to objects on for a moment. Grab the pivot point, and let's just drag it right down to the bottom manipulation point there, and then turn this back off. We just need it on to snap to this point. Okay, so we're on frame 1 of our character layer, which is our layer that we have our ball on, and let's just move it up to the start point. When I'm animating the ball along this path of action, I'm going to try to keep the line around the middle, somewhere approximately in the middle of this ball, and we're going to let's have it actually start off frame, and we'll have the ball bounce into frame from the left side of screen. Sorry, in the last lesson we covered some animation principles. We covered timing, slow ins and slow outs, and we covered stretch and squash. In this lesson we're going to cover all 3 of those, but we're also learning about the path of action as well, which is one of the animation principles. We're also going to settle this ball at the end. When it comes to a stop, we're going to settle it, and it's going to ease into the last pose. Let's start easing out of pose 1. So like we talked about earlier, we want to have our poses close together with more in-betweens at the top, so it's slow. And then as it starts to fall, the drawings are going to get, or the poses are going to get further apart with less in-betweens. So let's go on our timeline. We can you can tap the greater than less than keys next to your M on your keyboard to step down the timeline. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and set a key. So press F6 on your keyboard to set a key, or you can right click and insert keyframe. So once we've set a key, you press V on your keyboard for the selection tool here, the toolbar, the first one. We can move this symbol over for our second pose. I'm just going to place it here for now. So now we have pose 1, pose 2. We'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 down the timeline. F6, press a key. Now let's turn our onion skinning on. This button right here. And again, we get this bracket. We talked about this in the last class. We have this bracket here that shows up with little dots in the middle. We can drag this bracket to, basically this is a range of which we can see our drawings, onion skinned. So it's like turning on the light on a light table, on a traditional animation light table, so that we can see through our pages and see all the drawings that we've created so far. So we have 1, 2, and we're going to set our third pose. Let's bring it over here. So we might adjust this later. Right now we're just going to be blocking in our animation. Every session that we have here, we're always going to block our animation in first, and then we're going to refine it. So we don't want to get too picky right off the bat. We just want to quickly set our poses, check it, and then fix them, and then check it again. So when we talk about blocking and refining, this is our animation workflow. It's going to be a process of blocking the basic timing and positions, always blocking first, keeping it real loose, and then going in and refining and tightening our animation up. So right now we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's continue blocking. So at this point the ball is going to start to gain speed. So I'm only going to go, instead of 4 frames down the timeline, I'm just going to go 2 more. This is going to make the ball go faster. F6 to set a key, and we're going to make our positions farther apart now. So let's bring it about there. We'll do 2 more. F6. And for this pose, the ball is now starting to gain a lot of speed. I want to stretch it out a little bit just to create the illusion of speed, and it'll help with impact as well. So squash it in X and stretch it in Y an equal amount, so we maintain volume in the ball. And go to the corner here and let's rotate it a bit. And then let's go with 1 frame over in the timeline, set a key, and we'll go straight to our impact pose. So drag it right down. We can straighten the ball out a little bit, and let's squash it down in Y and stretch it out in X, approximately an equal amount. Okay, let's see what we've done here. I'm going to zoom out. I'm just going to select this whole region. We can see all of our poses. These are closer together. This is where the action is going to be slow, and it's going to start to speed up. Now I don't like the spacing here. 1, 2, 3. Let's go to our fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. We should move this a little bit. Selection tool. So we'll move this one further down, closer to the impact pose. We want this action in here to be really fast. Okay, so now that we have our first bounce, let's check it out. So turn onion skinning off. So let's just tween this. We're going to tween it, check it, and then untween it. Okay, so let's press enter on our keyboard and watch it. Alright, so let's just go through and finish off our ball bounce. Let's untween. Let's go to the next frame and just key that. We're going to hold the ball in its impact position for 2 frames. And then we'll do the same thing we did on the other side for this next bounce. You have to remember this bounce is half the height. It's much smaller, so there's going to be less poses in here. Only go 1 frame over without any in between here, because it's going to launch up really quick. Okay, so we can go ahead and just move this up, squash and stretch it again, and rotate it. You really want to get this V-shape path of action at the impact area where it hits the ground and launches back up. So I'm going to go 2 more frames, press F6 to set a key, and let's bring our ball right to the top. Now I want to get it back to its original position, so let's go to frame 1 for a moment. I'm going to copy this ball and paste it over here. and then it goes back, of course, to its original position in frame 1. But let's just bring it, make sure you're on the proper frame. We're going to bring the ball over. Let's turn our onion skinning back on so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so let's bring it up here. We want this to be very slow, and actually I'm going to go back to this drawing. We want this to be quick movement, so we want to bring it away from this, the impact pose. I'm calling this the launch pose. Okay, so I think we can set 2 frames at the top here, the top of our bounce, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, this is a slow movement. Set a key and just bring it over a little bit. And let's do 2 frames over. 1, 2, set a key. And then 1 more frame. 1 frame over. It's going to come down quick, F6. And let's bring it right down. Because it didn't bounce as high, the impact won't be as great. So we're not going to squash it just quite as much as we did on the first time. So you can see it's a little bit higher. And then we'll go 1 frame over for this launch. Now you can copy and paste this one if you want and just modify it. I'm just gonna eyeball it. Because again, it's not going to stretch so much because it's losing energy as it's moving along because it's not bouncing as high. Okay, then we're going to do 2 more poses for the top here. So let's bring these a couple frames apart. Let's do 3. And again, I'm going to go back to that original shape. Just choose a keyframe. Any one of these keyframes. You can go back to 1 or one of these where the ball isn't stretched or squashed at all, and just copy it. And I want to bring it over here and paste it here. Bring it over. So we're going to do 2 of these. We went 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We'll go 3 frames apart for now, see how that works. Let's do this quickly. Now for this last bounce, I don't think I'm really going to squash it a heck of a lot. I'm going to go 1 frame down for the drop. And just bring it in the middle. And then just 1 frame again, key it, and bring it down for the impact. Now maybe I'll squash it a tiny bit. And then for the last bounce, I'm not gonna squash it at all. So let's do 2 frames over F6 and just bring it right up to the top of this bounce. It's just a small little bounce. 2 frames over again, F6, and we'll bring it down to the ground. Sorry, I made a little mistake here. Let's go back to that last position. We don't want that squash to be on the ball, so let's go back to one of these frames where it has its original volume, and we'll just copy it. Go back to this frame and we'll just paste it and bring it back over to where it's supposed to be here at the top of the bounce, and we'll paste it here again and just bring it back over to the bottom of this bounce, and now it's going to roll. It'll start to roll quickly and ease into the last pose. So we'll go 6 frames for now, F6 that, and then we can drag and move our ball over, or we can hold our shift down and use the right arrow key. So it's going to roll quickly at first, so we'll space them rather farther apart. And it's going to roll quickly at first, so we'll space them pretty far apart with lots of in-betweens, as you can see up on the timeline. And we'll just go 10 more frames and F6 that, and we'll just bring it over a little bit. So lots of in-betweens, but not spaced very far apart on the stage, which will give us a nice ease in. So let's tween all of these. If you'd like to, you can go to your path of action layer and just hide it right underneath the eye. The little dot, you can just select that. Okay, so let's press enter on your keyboard to play it. Whoa, what happened there? So let's check out what happened. This is all working okay, and then something just jumped there. I think we're missing an impact pose. Let's turn our onion skinning back on to check out what happened. Yeah, we're totally missing an impact pose here. Sometimes things like this can happen while we're animating, so let's just take a look at how we can fix that. Okay, let's turn our path of action back on. Okay, let's turn our onion skinning back off. So we're going to have to separate all these keys, so just select one and drag all along the right to the end of the timeline, or right to the end of where your keys are. Once that's highlighted, you can just click anywhere on it and drag it over one. And it looks like we're missing an impact pose here. Let's just set a key on there. Press F6. Q for the free transform tool. And we'll bring that down. Looks like we're okay now. Let's play it again. Okay, so this is basically just blocked out. Now we're checking it, and we're going to look for any timing issues, which I see one right now. The first bounce looks good. The second bounce seems to drop too fast. Drops too fast right in this area, and this bounce seems really fast. So let's just check out why that's happening. Okay, so let's tackle one issue at a time. This drop is happening very fast, and you can see that we've only given it one in between. So let's turn our onion skinning back on. So from this pose to this pose, that's okay. And then we have our launch pose here, and then a pose on either side, and then one drop pose. Okay, so I think what we need to do is we'll move this down. We're going to need to put another key pose in here, or just in between it a little bit better. Let's watch it one more time. Yeah, no, we're going to need another key pose for that drop. Actually, let's just increase the amount of in-betweens between this top pose and our drop pose. Select this drop pose and drag right to the end, right to our last key, and we'll just slide everything over one key, one frame. So that's going to increase the time it takes for it to drop. So let's play it again. Okay, so I don't like at the top of this drop, it just moves straight across. So let's actually add another key pose in here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 across. Let's shut the onion skinning off for a moment. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can go 2 in the middle, and we'll set another key here, F6, and we'll just move that up. Let's turn our onion skinning back on so we can see what we're doing. And you can use your arrow keys or just drag it up, just to give it more of an arcing motion. I'm just going to move this over a little bit. So we have 1, 2, 3 at the top of the arc, and then we have our drop pose. This should look better. Okay, let's play it again. That does look better. Okay, there's one thing I want to do here. Just like we did on our first impact pose, on our second impact pose, we want to hold that. Let's hold that for one frame. So let's go to our impact pose on the second bounce. Go to the next frame and drag everything over one, because we're going to create another key pose right beside it. So we're just going to copy. So go to that impact, the second impact pose, copy it, copy frames, go right next to it, and paste. There. So now we have 2 key poses with that impact pose, and that's just going to cause it to hold. Let's play it again. It sticks a little. We're going to fix that though. After the first pass was basically our blocking stage, and then we're going through and fixing all these little issues. This is the refining stage. So what I want to do now is I want to create a little bit of a moving hold on these impact poses. We held them for 2 frames. Now I'm going to just step across the timeline a little bit with my greater than less than keys. Let's go to step right to the first impact pose. We held it for 2 frames, so go to the second one, and let's zoom in on it. Press Q on your keyboard and select the symbol. Okay, so there's the first one. Let's go to the second impact pose where we're holding it for the second frame, and let's just squash it just a tiny bit more, maybe just a line's width down, and stretch it out a tiny bit. So when we drag back and forth, we're going to see it just squash a tiny bit, and that's a moving hold. That's just going to improve the overall aesthetics of this movement. I'm going to zoom out. Let's go to the next bounce. I'm just going to step down the timeline, go to the next bounce. There's the first one. Here's the second one. I'm going to zoom in, do the same thing. Q on the keyboard, squash it down just a tiny bit, stretch it out a tiny bit, so give it a moving hold, and again that's just going to improve the feeling of impact and weight that this ball has. Alright, so let's play it again. That looks pretty good. We won't do it for the third bounce because it's not as much velocity or impact hitting the ground. Okay, so one last thing I want to do in refining this bounce is in the roll when it eases out, or I should say it eases into its final position. Now I don't like using presets too much in software. Flash does have some that are worth using. So let's turn on our onion skinning again and zoom into the area where it eases into the final pose, and we'll press V on our keyboard to select the last pose. We manually keyed the ball easing into its final position. So this is the final impact pose, or the final pose of the last bounce. And then we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to get to about the middle of the roll, and then 10. So we went 6 and then 10 down. All these in betweens causing it to move slow and ease into its final pose, but it doesn't ease quite the way I want it to ease. It's a little choppy there. It's sort of go, stop, go. I want it to cushion right into its final pose. So Flash does have this ease function. When we select anywhere between these last two poses, you'll see this under properties, you'll see this ease function. You can type it in or you can hover over it and drag. I'm just going to hover over and drag it right to 100, and you can see it says out, which is kind of funny because we're actually easing into the final pose. So if you turn your onion skinning back on, put this to 0 just to see. With the onion skinning on, you can see all the in-betweens are evenly spaced. Now if you put it at 100, you can see that it actually decreases the space as we get to the final pose so that it cushions it and gives it a nice ease in to our final pose. Now if we play that again, and you can see it stops nice and soft. Alright, so let's zoom out and have a look at what we've done. Let's hide our path of action, go to frame 1, turn onion skinning off, and let's press enter on the keyboard and watch our ball bounce. And we've put in way more frames than we need here, and I don't want to render out a movie and have to wait all this time before it starts over again. Let's go to frame 65 and just select all these unneeded frames. Right click and let's go to remove frames. Remember, we're inside our shot comp right now. So to get out of our shot comp, we can either go to the top bar here and click on scene to get to the outer section of our scene file, or we can just double click anywhere in the white area as long as we don't click on the background symbol or the ball symbol. Just go up in space here and just double click, and you'll see we went back to scene 1, and we now have this black mask. Let's move on now and animate a camera move. Again, we're going to block this out just like we do in all of our animation. We're going to block out our camera move, check it, and then we're going to refine it after. So let's go to frame 64, because that's what we had it at inside the comp. I think that's frame 64. And on our shot comp layer, we're going to increase our timeline up to frame 64 and insert frame. Right, this shuts off. That doesn't really matter. Let's go into our camera view and we'll increase this to 64 as well. Insert frame. There we go. Just so it doesn't pop off. So basically the way it works in Flash doesn't have a camera that we can animate. So what we do is we animate the entire shot comp. Think of it as having a camera mounted to a mechanical arm that points down at a table, and we're doing cutout animation. And instead of moving the camera, all the elements we have on the table are moving. So it's basically a traditional animation style, because that's how traditional animation was done, is the camera pointing down on the table. And everything else just moves. We'll move the background and everything else, right? The shot comp encompasses everything. Again, if we go into our shot comp, we can click to go in. We have our ball and our background. Click out in space to leave it. And the shot comp encompasses the ball and the background and everything else that's in our scene. So we're going to move the shot comp to simulate a camera move. So really what we're going to do is slide our entire shot comp over. So let's set a key at around, just scrub your timeline till you get to about the top of the second bounce. So we're going to keep the ball just on the left side of screen. Press F6 and let's go right to the end. Press F6 again, set a key. So we'll go to the last frame. I don't want to just drag this over because I might move it up or down in the Y dimension. I only want to shift everything over to the left in the X. So I'm going to hold Shift down on my keyboard with the shot comp selected, and on the last key, hold Shift down and press my left arrow button and move it over to about there, and that will simulate a pan, a camera pan. Let's put a classic tween in between these two keys, and you'll see it slide over. Now let's just do a quick test movie. You can do a test movie just by going to Control in your menu and select Test Movie in Flash, and it'll play that for you. Let's aim to follow the ball a little bit, and then we'll zoom in on it once it stops. Let's stop this pan once the ball settles, and we know it settles around here. So let's just drag this key in a little bit to about 50. Let's have the pan stop on the last bounce, right about there. So bring that into about 40. One thing you have to remember too as well, you notice the ball jumping? Well, that's because this shot comp, if we select it and go to the properties, it's set to graphic. Now, because we're setting keys on the outside of the shot comp, we have to make sure that under looping here, we want to keep this on play once. But we want to make sure that each key, you can see that this key for this camera is at 21. You have to take a look here at what frame you're on, 21. When you select the shot comp symbol, under play once, under first, the frame should be the same. So it says 21 here, which is great. Now let's go to the second keyframe. It's at frame 40. Now I know that this one is not at frame 40, it's at frame 64, which is where we set our key originally. And when you first set the key, it puts this number that you first set the key at. So because we dragged it, we have to actually change it. So let's put it back to 40. Okay, so now when we play it, we won't have that jump in the ball anymore. Okay, so we have the camera move stop around the time the ball stops bouncing. Let's just hold on to it for a minute, and let's zoom in. So let's go to about here, just around frame 50 or so. Press F6 for a key, and let's zoom in and let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's do a zoom in over 8 frames. Press F6 again. Now to zoom in, there's no camera move and flash, so what we have to do is we have to scale the entire shot comp up to simulate a zoom in. So once we've set our second key for the zoom in, select this, make sure the shot comp is selected. Press Q on your keyboard to activate the free transform tool, and let's scale the entire shot comp up. Okay, so let's put a classic tween in between those two keys. And let's just scrub through. So we have our pan, it stops panning, the ball finishes rolling, and then we zoom into the ball. And we can bring that, if we want to zoom it, have it in center. Now, let's just play it. It's a hard zoom. Let's give it a bit of cushioning on each side. So let's go to, before the zoom starts, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. Press F6. And give it another 3 frames on the other side. F6. So we want to cushion, want to slow into our first key of the zoom and slow out of the last key of our zoom. So let's just go to the first key and we'll scale it up a little bit. And tween that. So it'll just start to move in slowly. And then the last one, we'll just scale it a tiny bit and tween that. Okay, so it's kind of shifting around. So let's turn our onion skinning on. So sometimes you have to just sort of go to each key and adjust it a little bit and then scrub over it and just make sure it looks okay. I'm just looking at the ground plane here, this line for the ground plane that we drew. Okay, and then at the end it sort of moves to the right a little bit. So let's just get rid of that. We can see in between the first 2 poses that we set for the zoom, it basically zooms in just straight toward the center, and then it moves to the right. So we'll just go to the last pose and move it over to the left a little bit so it's not moving to the right. We'll just shift it up a little, down a little. Now let's put an ease on these. Just place your marker on a frame anywhere between the 2 poses for the ease in, and go to your ease and let's keep it at, let's bring it right down to -100. So that'll start it in slow. We'll go to it in between our ease out, and we'll bring it right to 100. And if we play that now, okay, so that zoom in now has a little bit of a cushion at the beginning of it, and by cushioning I mean easing. So we have a camera pan following it along, and then we zoom in. Let's just do a quick test movie. Okay, so today we covered timing, more timing, slowing in, slowing out, squash and stretch, and path of action. We also went over animation workflow, where we block animation in first, just very rough, and then we continue to do refining passes on it. and we learned how to animate a camera move in Flash. And that's pretty much it for this session.